Namaste. Namaste refers to a symbolic greeting meaning, I respect to divine in you. So, namaste to all our listeners and viewers. We respect the divine in you. My name is Ravi,
Hello everyone, I'm Sudarshan.
and we are in the studio of APEX1RADIO. Today is February 9th of 2020, and it's 13 minutes past 6 in our studio. Therefore, we are live again to bring you the fourth episode of Radio Jagaran, the voice of New American. We started this program on January 12th of this year with the aim of bringing information concerning the New American community every Sunday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. However, due to some technical difficulties, we couldn't start our program at 6 p.m. exact. But, however, saying that, in the last episode, we discussed about some facts and figures about migration, immigration, refugees, and third country settlement. Today, we are again here in the studio with an interesting topic on mental health and issue. Sudarshan Dai, how shall we move on to this topic for discussion today?
Well, as you give the background, today's show is about mental health 101, meaning basic understanding about mental health. We aren't going in depth, but we'll talk about generally mental health in our community, right? And then before going to that, we will try to bring a context from what mental health itself is and how do we define mental health in a very everyday, common conversation and global context and nationally, and then we'll come into some facts and myths about mental health. And then finally, after the break, let's say it, the second half of the program, we'll talk about mental health in our community, what we need to know. So the take-home message is you need to know three things which will help you understand mental health. Just three things. So at the end of this show today, if you can go home, or if you, what I'm trying to say is, right, the end of this show, we want to give you three important key messages that you need to know about mental health 101.
Okay.
So with that, we'll end today's show.
Oh, that's perfect. So stay tuned till the time when we would say that those three magic sentences, I would say, or three magic messages. So today we are talking about the mental health problems in general. Also, we would also be discussing briefly and touching about the prevalence of this issue in Bhutanese Nepali community in central Ohio. But after this short musical break, so enjoy this music. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. This is Ravi and Sudarshan from Radio Jagaran, the voice of New American. This is APEX1 Radio, and you are listening to Radio Jagaran. Welcome back after this short musical break. You are listening to fourth episode of Radio Jagaran, Voice of New Americans. Sudarshan Dai and I are addressing mental health prevalence in the Bhutanese community of Central Ohio. When I came across the word mental health, I always try to correlate it with day-to-day life. I have seen people stressed with office work. I have seen people who are neglected in a family. I have seen people failing in a relationship. I have seen people not able to cope up with the dead ones. I have seen people with frustration and anger. I have seen such people finally ending up their life. I know it's difficult to handle the situation, but we have to understand there is always a way. You don't know the solution doesn't mean there is no solution at all. Go to gym, go to yoga, learn guitar, join French speaking class, and best of all, speak. Speak your problems with friends, families, or reach to us. Remember, no one is perfect. Every one of us has some kind of mental trouble at some time. I'm stressed with my work. I have failed in relationship multiple times. I am away from my family. I have anxiety. That doesn't mean I am mental. Sudarshan Dai, you have been working in the field of mental health for quite a long time. You are a certified mental health first aid trainer as well. When you hear the word like mental or crazy or crack, can you associate with the mental health? Or can we address the mental health and mental illness?
Well, actually, to the contrary, those words are actually very negatively used, negative connotations about mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And word like crack or mental or the commonly used words are has nothing to do with the mental health, actually, in reality. Mental health or mental illness, let's put it that way, mental illness would be an appropriate way to say it. Mental illness is simply a disease. So just like any other disease, right? Let's give a easy example. You can think of diabetes, or you can think of blood pressures. These are diseases. And just like the disease that I mentioned, mental health is also another disease.
Right.
So we have to understand this as a disease. Sometimes we think, okay, that prompts another question. Well, what is disease, right? You can ask that.
Yeah.
But disease simply means having difficulty, right? You are not in ease, you are not in comfort. Something that causes you discomfort is disease. That has a structural and functional disorder in the body itself is a disease. So we have to understand mental health as a structural and functional disorder within the human system. It does not come from outside. So the fundamental understanding of mental health as a disease is the primary thing. The first thing when we talk about mental health, you don't have to go into the definition. You don't have to define it. What World Health Organization or United States define mental health as. Those are good things to know. But primarily, the basic thing is mental health is a disease, is a disorder. Okay.
Yeah, I think rather than using the term mental health, maybe we can address it as mental health problems.
Well, there are a couple of ways we can say it. It's very hard to define what mental health is, but the right way to say it would be mental illness or mental health challenges. So mental health is a very ambiguous word. What do I mean by mental health, right? I don't think it would be appropriate, even if I use it, that wasn't appropriate.
Right.
But if we really want to make a context to this issue, is mental health challenges or mental illness or mental health disorder.
Well, having said that, we do we have some statistics or some data like how many of the global population is suffering from these mental health issues, or like how do we address the mental health in general population?
Well, we can go into how this mental health can be addressed as we move forward. But before that, let me answer your question. Right, globally today,
absolutely.
1 in 4 people around the world is either affected or will be affected by mental or neurological disorder at some point of their life, right? So 1 in 4 people. So which roughly makes around 450 million people in the world are currently going through or having that condition, are suffering because of mental health challenges or mental health disorder. But what we have to understand is mental health simply means a big term. It means a lot of things. We really have to break it down and make it very easy for us to understand when we are talking about mental health.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But we can look nationally as well about that figure, which is very important for our viewers to keep in mind that
I
when
think this
we are
is
saying,
very understandable thing that every 1 in 4 people that
globally,
means, globally,
yeah,
that means every household
has a person. If you are a family of 4, simply put it this way: if you are a family of 4, one person in your household is having mental health challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a very good message that we all have to think of. That every person, every household has a person suffering from the mental health issues.
Correct. It literally does not mean that there is one person in your house, but figuratively you can think that if you are a family of 4 or if you are a family of 5 in the United States, let me give that number, nearly 1 in 5 in the US adult is suffering from mental illness, meaning 46.6 million people as of 2017. Okay, this is a national data. 46.6 million people have diagnosable mental health issue in the United States, meaning making every 1% out of 5. Again, we can go into the family analogy. If you are a family of 5, one of your family member actually is struggling with mental health challenges. Okay, so we just have to think about within our own family, someone in my own family might be struggling. That's a big number. So we cannot, say, oh, this is nothing that doesn't happen to my family, or we are good.
So when you see a person having a mental illness or having trouble with the mental health, then you should consider it as a normal things that can happen in any family. If suppose a person can be diagnosed with some disease like diabetes or tuberculosis, it's the similar way that the person can be diagnosed as a mental health issue, right?
That's correct. When we are thinking about disease, we should think this normally, but this is nothing. This is not a thing to be think normally, okay, without making it complicated. But the point is that when it comes to mental illness, we see from a different lens. And when it comes to other diseases, let's say, all diseases are bad. We don't want, somebody suffering from, let's say, diabetes or cancer or anything like that. But what is lacking in our common sense is the perspective that we put into mental illness. The lenses that we are looking into mental illness is something that we have to talk about. And today's show is also, basically, we are trying to cover the fact that we have to see from the same lenses to all the diseases, whether that is mental health challenge or diabetes or anything. All diseases are bad, right? But the point is, we have to change the narrative. We have to bring this issue into our daily life and understand from the daily life perspectives. We'll come into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hold tight.
So we'll have to talk about it because we have seen that there are lots of myths whenever we talk about the mental illness. So there are many different myths about mental health problems, and they often contribute to the stigma that many people still face. Stigma associated with mental illness is now called sanism. Just like racism or sexism, it is a form of oppression and discrimination. And there is a lot of sanism and misinformation around surrounding this mental illness still present within our society.
It is.
Yeah, and one of the myth that is prevalent in the society is whether the mental health problem doesn't affect me. That's what the mental health problem, that's what the major myth that I have seen. Is that really true?
Well, as I said in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Any myth is not true. That's why it is myth. Okay, first of all. So if someone is talking to you and saying, hey, this is a myth about mental health, first of all, it's not true. Mental health does not affect me. It's wrong, totally wrong, right?
Yeah.
It can affect anyone, anytime, or anywhere. Let's put it that way, right? It does not mean literally it will affect everyone, but
it can.
it can.
That's
yeah,
what
the
we are saying,
likeliness
that,
that you could be struggling with mental health,
Uh-huh.
or you could in future struggle with mental health is very, very high. No one can deny.
So having said it can affect anyone, right?
Yeah, any ages,
So-
anyone, any point of time.
So even children's have mental health problems.
Yes, they do. Right, there is a another myth talking about children don't suffer from mental illness because they are children, right? But that's not true. 1 out of 10 children in the United States actually suffer from major mental health issue.
Wow.
In almost like depression. Or, let's not make that complicated. 1 in 10 children in the United States actually suffer from mental illness. Right,
That's a
so
huge
it affects
population,
children
almost like
too.
a 10%, right?
Yeah, 10% of the population. So it affects children as well. Now there are other myths, interestingly, right? As you said, mental health problem do not affect me, which is myth, which is wrong. People with mental health problems are violent and unpredictable.
Right.
This is oftentimes portrayed in movies and stories and all those things. Some people doing very horrible crimes and associated with mental illness. But
just like the sign and the symptoms of different diseases varies. So if the person is suffering from one kind of mental illness might be violent and unpredictable, but the other type of mental illness, they might have not been able to cope up with the situations. That's why they are not violent, or they are violent.
That's a great question. Okay, sometimes people try to make illogical conclusion in that way.
Right.
People with certain type of mental illness are violent, but people with other type of mental illness are not violent.
Right.
But that's just some type of assumption only. So being violent has nothing to do with mental health. Okay. A person who is violent could be suffering from mental health. Okay. Someone who was violent because of whatever reason may have mental health symptoms. But the mental health symptom is not the contributing factor towards violence. So the people suffering with mental health, we have seen in movies and all those things, it's just they are trying to portray a bad picture of someone suffering with mental health.
Right.
But the fact that we have to know is mental health does not make anyone violent. Okay? A person with a violent history could be suffering from mental health. So we really have to know these two things. Mental health, whatever type of mental health it is, a severe, mild, or mental health is seen in 3 different groups. One is
mild, moderate, and severe.
and a moderate, correct, and then severe.
Right.
So one could be suffering from mild, moderate, or severe, but it does not, in any categories, it does not contribute to violence. It does not. And let me read something from the Mental Health USA, Mental Health Institute of America, right? What it says is that the vast majority of people with mental health problems are no more likely to be violent than anyone else, okay? And this is the National Institute. Most people with mental illness are not violent, and only 3 to 5% of violent act can be attributed to individual living with serious mental illness.
Okay.
So all the violent act, if you put into percentage, only 3 to 5% is attributed to or associated with people having serious mental illness. In fact, people with severe mental illness are over 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crime than the general population. So you have to flip that one. If you are struggling with mental health, if somebody is struggling with mental health, if I am struggling with mental illness, I am likely to be victim of violence than me contributing towards victim. So we really have to change the narrative and see from the other side. You probably know someone with mental health problem and don't even realize it, because many people with mental health problems are highly active, productive members of our community. Okay, this is from Mental Health Institute That's the National Institute in the United States. So we have to understand this very clearly. I am talking to someone, who is listening to us, a family member, friend, or someone, that from today, we have to change our narrative about understanding mental health.
Right.
That's the message. From today, we have to start thinking mental illness from a different lens,
different perspective,
from a different perspective. And we'll tell you, we'll tell you what 3 things you need to remember today. Okay.
Yeah. So we are talking about the mental illness myth, and one of the mental illness myth that we have been seeing in our community is saying why it would bother me because he can just take a pill. I can't do anything for a person with a mental health problem. So attention and the emotional supports are not provided to a mental illness patient. Have you seen such type of things in the community, or
Yes.
as a general thing?
Yes. People do say, just give me a pill and I will be fine. Or if someone in a family is struggling with mental health challenges, they would say, I need to go see a doctor. And doctor can write me some prescription and I'll be fine, or my family member will be fine, so on and so forth. But it's not that simple. Mental health, it does help to some extent, if someone has, let's say, psychosis or severe mental health disorder, let's put it that way. When someone is going through severe mental health problem, medication is one of the way to manage it.
Okay.
Medication is one of the way to manage it. So remember this word, to manage it,
Manage,
right?
right.
There is no cure. So for cure, it is all about lifestyle.
Right.
Every person who is struggling through mental health, whether it is severe, moderate, or mild, has to have a certain lifestyle, need to change lifestyle to really fix this problem. And we'll talk about how to fix lifestyle, right?
Okay. Yeah. You recently said the management of the life, right? So when you say management, can we associate it with the prevention? Because we have seen lots of myths saying that the mental illness, the prevention doesn't work, or it is impossible to prevent mental illness. Is that so?
Well, that's also wrong, right? Robbie, I'm sorry. Today you are on the wrong end. So the point is, after treatment, people, who have gone through mental health challenges in the past live normal life, as I said, but the person need to manage it, right?
Yeah.
They could be as productive as any other person in the society. They could be very actively contributing. They could be driver, teachers, nurses, doctor, professor, anyone with mental health illness, those who have gone through treatment, or those who are even going through treatment and have learned how to manage mental illness, can function and can be productive. As I read earlier, right, can be as productive or more productive than any other people in the society. So mental health is treatable, right?
Yeah.
Medication is not only the way. Rarely medication should be helpful, right? Only when doctor prescribes, only when doctor thinks person A or B should be given medication, then only go for medication. Other than that, mental illness is all about management, understanding what it is, and understanding not only the person who is going through mental illness, but the person in that environment, meaning who the person is living with. The whole environment is going to impact that person's mental health or mental wellness, let's put it that way. So until and unless we change the environment, whether the environment is within the family or the environment in the workplace or the environment overall in a society, person struggling with a mental health cannot recover. So the biggest focus that we wanted to talk about is changing the environment, the micro environment and the macro environment. Micro environment meaning within the household or in the workplace, and the macro environment in the larger society.
Right. So the overall take-home messages for all of these is the mental health illness can be manageable, and the mental health illness can be treatable.
Yes,
right.
It is manageable. It is treatable.
It is treatable.
It is, people say that, someone with a mental illness is mental illness for forever. Someone is struggling with a mental health, do not recover after even taking medications. Those are not true. And within our own community, let's come to our community, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did a survey in 2016 and 2015, two surveys in our own community. We had seen that overwhelming majority of the people were at that time, perception change with education and awareness, were at that time thinking mental illness is untreatable. Around 78% in the survey say that it is untreatable.
So you changed the topic. I mean, you diverted the topic towards our community.
Yeah.
So let me give you a little bit facts about the prevalence of mental illness in our community. So according to 2011 International Organization of Migration, it published data from people from the camps, I think. So in which they detected that about 55,604 Bhutanese Nepali population were examined medically for visa processing. I think that's a routine visa processing, medical examination. And among them, about 3% of these population were referred to psychiatric evaluation. Next thing, when these population they came from refugees to USA after resettlement, there was a community-based cross-sectional survey which was done among 423 Bhutanese Nepali population from Arizona, Georgia, New York, and Texas. It was aged between 18 years to 83 years, and the survey was done in 2016. And it was found that about 54%, I do not know, about 54%,
yes.
they have anxiety, depression, and psychological distress. I do not know whether these data is exaggerated or it might actually be true, because having found 54% with anxiety, depression, and psychological distress might be something to be really taken into consideration.
It is.
Yeah.
But
and as a leader, you have been a leader, the community leader, and you have been a CEO of Bhutanese community of Central Ohio. So how do you justify these figures back in Nepal or back in in USA?
well, one interesting thing is it has nothing to do with me being anyway, let's not go in that direction. Okay. The point here is sometimes this data could be exaggerated. Okay.
Yeah, that's what
right?
that's what I was
sometimes
thinking. Maybe
and
sometimes
there's sampling error too, right? Meaning if I send somebody to get the sampling, and then if that person visited all the folks who are having a mental health issue, then the data could show some other results. However, what we have to understand is overall in cumulative studies, number of studies done at a different point of time,
that's true,
had shown high mental health challenges among this population, meaning this population has one of the highest mental health disorder across all other ethnic community.
Right.
So in the United States, the general population, compared to the general population, mental health stress among Bhutanese population is 3 times as large. Okay, so this 54% sounds really alarming. Maybe we have to look this from a different perspective and different angle.
Yeah, I took this data just because it was the latest in 2016, and I took it because just to say whether the percentage that's been described over here is exactly exaggerated, because if it is exaggerated, then it might not be a good thing for us.
I don't want to say it is exaggerated. What I want to say is there could have been an error, right?
Okay,
sampling error
perfect.
and all those things. Because in a truly scientific study, nobody wants to exaggerate until and unless someone is funding to do this. And when it comes to mental health, it's not a fossil fuel or something like that. Somebody's getting money.
Right.
They do it truly because they wanted to see something. But what we have to understand is, let's ignore 54%. What we have to understand is there is a high
prevalence
of mental health challenges in this community. And as we discussed last time, we have to understand the context, where the community is coming from.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Those the trauma that we talk about, the triple trauma paradigms, meaning you are kicked out of the country and you had a trauma. You had to live in a refugee camp and you again had a trauma and you have to leave everything that you know of and come to, let's say, third country resettlement. Again, that adds trauma because you are coming to a new place you don't know anything about and you have to try to survive in that new place. So trauma is one of the reasons. And stress and anxiety are also other reasons, that happens. And what we have to understand is sometimes when you are newly resettled, the stress and anxiety go up. But after sometimes when you find job, when you find employment, and when you get settled into a community, right? When you begin to feel like, oh, this is my home, anxiety could go down, right?
Yeah.
So this number could change.
Right,
but
absolutely.
Having said that, we really have to understand that there is a high prevalence of mental health in our community and across the communities, especially immigrants and refugee community.
Right.
So what we need to do is, it's good to bring this discussion, but the next step is how do we move towards addressing this issue? How do we fix this issue?
Right.
That's the bigger challenge.
Right.
And as a community leader, I think I would be happy to move in the direction.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic thing. However, so the mental illness, I think, can happen to anyone. That's what we already discussed, right? And I believe that the mental health illness is a health condition that changes a person's thinking, feelings, or behaviors, or that could be anything. That could be anything. As we have been seeing this typical pattern of higher prevalence of mental health illness in our community, especially I don't know whether we have done any such studies in which we have seen what sort of people are majorly facing these problems, whether it's age-wise problems or the gender-wise problems, or there might be an economic status or education level or something as such. So as a community member, you might have observed these sort of patterns. So do you have any idea on these sort of age-wise or the gender-wise or the economic-wise status on the mental health issues?
Well, fortunately, from my observational point of view, and in the research that I refer to, does not really recognize any particular age group. It happens across the age group, across the gender group, across the economic group, right? Whether you are just struggling to make your ends meet, or you are already way into a good living standard.
Right.
It does not happen that way. It's happening across the lines in the society. So that is one thing that we have to think about when we are talking about, when we are working in the community, that these things can happen to anyone. We don't have to isolate anyone. Hey, you are already well-to-do. It looks like you have a house, you have a car, and you have a well-paying job. You may not have a mental health issues. No, it can happen to anyone. And in the next episode, when we talk about, I have some specific age group thing when it comes to suicidal ideation and suicide. But other than that, when we talk about mental illness, only there is no age or economic or other barriers or gender as such.
Okay. We are talking about the mental health today. In fact, mental health is a curable disease, and each mental illness has its own characteristic symptoms. However, there are some general warning signs. So if any of you see changes in your friends or family members, like change in personality, excessive anxieties, prolonged depressions, and complete changes in eating or sleeping pattern, mood swings, substance abuse, or excessive anger and violent behavior, you should suspect that he or she might be having some mental problems and has to seek the help of doctor. So in our community, like how many of people are so educated, or they know that whenever these sort of problems arise, they have to go to the doctor or seek the doctor?
All right, that's the big elephant in the room,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
That's the big question that we wanted to really break down.
Right.
And definitely, I want to bring this topic. Maybe we want to take a short break right now. And also, one of our viewer has ask a very thoughtful question, and I will combine both your question and the reader's question, and then try to answer that question. Or
So,
let's try to discuss that.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Here we'd like to take a short musical break. Today we are talking about mental illness. We'll be short. We'll be short, and don't go anywhere. You are listening to Radio Jagaran, the voice of New Americans. Welcome back. After this short musical break, you are listening to fourth episode of Radio Jagaran, Voice of New Americans. Together with Sudarshan Dai, we are host of this program. My name is Ravi, and today we are addressing mental health prevalence in Bhutanese community of Central Ohio. According to National Alliance on Mental Health, an estimated, as you said, Sudarshan Dai, 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness in a given year. Undiagnosed, inadequately treated, or untreated mental illness lead to negative coping mechanisms and even result in suicide. Therefore, breaking down of stigma and misconception in our society has to be taken with serious consideration. Having said that, we have one of our listeners asking us a very good questions. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Oh, sure. Yes. And I'll try to cover both, right? And the idea is, how do we change the environment, right? We brought that issue. How do we change the environment and address this issue? Two things that we have to understand. One is the clinical side or the counseling side, that we have to address this issue. Or somebody need to see a counselor, somebody need to see a psychiatric if they have this issue, because it is their job to diagnose. So the diagnosis is not on someone who is a social worker or a community member or a QMHS or somebody else who works as a support, but who are specialized in specifically in understanding mental health. So everybody has to go. If you are in doubt that you have a mental health illness, if someone has mental health illness in a family, someone is struggling with mental illness,
Right.
the person need to go see a psychiatrist, need to go see a counselor, need to go see a social worker for sure. Okay, that's one side. The other side is, how do we change environment? Even if someone is visiting a doctor regularly or taking medication, it is only half of the management. Okay.
Right.
The other half is changing the environment. So there comes the word, changing the environment. Let's talk about changing the environment at the micro level, or
Right.
at the home, or at individual level. So at individual level, if I see that I have some mental health challenges, I should be open about it. First thing, we have to know this is a disease,
Right.
and I should be open about it. I should try to know myself that I may have a mental health problem. There's nothing wrong in it, right? I have to talk to my friends,
Right.
and then take a recommendation that I am having such and such symptoms, right? And am I having a mental health issue? And definitely, go see a doctor. When you go see a doctor, or when you are with a provider, talk to them about the symptoms, just to know about it, just to clarify yourself.
Right,
Right.
right.
That's the first thing.
Right.
That's micro level. At individual level, I'm trying to manage mental health. But if you know someone in the family, then as a family member, if you are aware of mental illness, you have to bring that into the family conversation. Okay, that could be at the dining table. That could be at other occasions. We have to simplify mental illness. We should
Right.
not make this as a big issue that we should not make it a taboo.
Make it a taboo.
Right?
Absolutely.
We should overcome this mindset that we should not talk about mental health. Mental health is a curse or something like that.
Right.
Make it very simple, right? Anyone could be struggling with mental health. Within the family, it has to be a conversation that about a workplace, about someone maybe there is a sudden change in the lifestyle. Okay, son, daughter, parents, anyone that could be. If there is a sudden change in the lifestyle, asking them, hey, if you have any issues, if this is a mental illness, let's go to see a doctor, right? First of all, it can happen to anyone, right?
True.
One member in a family is struggling with a mental illness that could be severe, moderate, or mild.
Right.
So that's a genuine thing to bring this conversation within the family. Now, one thing that I wanted to share, what I had seen observationally.
Okay. Yeah.
I've been working in this mental health field for last 5 years, and in these last 5 years, I've seen amazing, successful stories and sadly falling stories. People with mental illness, right? The successful stories were families where they have certain amount of acceptance of the family member is struggling through mental health.
Right.
Whether that person is a dad, mom, or a son, and within the family, if they accept, okay, this is a mental health, we are supporting this person, we take him to hospital, he is going to hospital, we are giving him medication, or she takes medication timely, he goes to hospital, we encourage them, we see that environment, in that family, that person sort of recovers pretty quickly, leads a normal life, goes to work. But in other families where they see mental health as something, that person is just being uncontrollable, he doesn't know how to manage it, or he has other issues because of such and such, he's struggling. And family members aren't supporting, right? Even when they know the person is suffering from mental health, they wanted to stay away from that person. They don't want to talk about it. They want to minimize the conversation, and they are negatively viewing person who is struggling with mental health. Oftentimes, in those cases, the recovery takes much longer, or sometimes the person is unable to recover for forever because the family environment isn't positive, isn't supportive.
So
That is
you-
what I mean by changing the environment. Means
So you mean the treatment is equally important, but support should also be there.
support should also be there. I would rather say the support is very
Very-
important than treatment. Let's put it 50-50. But first thing is support. If there is appropriate support, the person regains quickly. He resumes to normal life. Despite he or she, despite the person maybe going to a psychiatric, maybe going to a counselor, or maybe taking medication, it doesn't matter. Let's think about two cases, okay? Both cases, in case A and case B, both persons are diagnosed with same kind of illness, take same medications, go to see a psychiatric or a counselor regularly, but the person A, who has a supportive environment in the family, recovers well and lives a normal life. But in the person B, let's say it where there is negative environment or family members aren't supporting, they don't want to talk about it, have a hard time recovering or getting well. And also, if they are recovering, they have a hard time managing it, or they may relapse into the situation. And you brought about the issue of self medication, and we can talk about self medication as well.
Yeah, I think those were really nicely put, and let us. I think it's a time in which we have to reveal those three magic take-home messages.
Right.
So, what are those three magic take-home messages for all our viewers and listeners?
Okay, before going to the magic word or three magic sentences, let's put it that way. I want to briefly talk about self-medication, right? This is today's conversation. It come to our attention. Oftentimes what happens is when a person who is struggling with mental illness do not get appropriate medical support or family support. Okay, both. When the person who is struggling with mental illness does not get medical support or family support, or does not find an appropriate environment, the person has to do something to calm down his own, the anxiety or whatever the person is going through.
Okay, yeah.
So in that process, they do a self-medication, meaning taking alcohol and drugs.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because that helps them calm down. And these are addictive too. And that takes the person into wrong direction. So oftentimes if we see someone who is dependent on banned substances, okay, who is dependent on drugs and alcohol, we may have to think that that person may be struggling with mental illness. Do not label that person in your home or family as alcoholic or druggist or anything like that.
Is that a negative coping mechanism?
That is a negative coping mechanism, but the person has nowhere to go. Since the person has nowhere to go, the person has to find some way to cope, right? That could be maybe piercing, that could be self-injury, and that could be taking banned substances or depending on alcohol as a negative coping mechanism. So you brought excellent point, right?
Yeah.
There is a positive coping mechanism and there is a negative coping mechanism. So if a person who is struggling with mental illness does not get the right attention, does not get the medical support, does not get the family support, tend to move towards negative coping mechanism. Okay, and negative coping mechanism are destructive to the person itself, and it goes on and on. It has economic cost and so forth. So even if we find someone who is struggling with mental illness and has adopted to negative coping mechanism, we have to be hopeful that if that person gets positive coping mechanism, supports and medical treatment, the person can recover and be a contributing member in a society.
So I think one of the negative coping mechanism is a suicidal ideation. Is that one?
Negative coping mechanism is not suicide ideation. Suicide ideation is a different thing. So definitely you brought this very important topic. We will bring that in the next issue.
That's true.
But negative coping mechanism are, right, as I said, taking banned substances or depending on alcohol, or also injury, self harm injuries and things like that.
Yeah.
But when we think about suicidal ideation or person attempting to suicide, that is the other side of the mountain. Sort of the person has gone way far from trying to cope. Now the person is trying to not cope but end to the suffering that person is going through. So definitely we would be doing more research on this, and we'll bring this topic. But before going to that, we want to come back to our three take-home messages.
Three magic take-home messages.
Yes. I don't know, say magic, but at least, the idea.
At least with the perspective of the mental health illness, I think those are three really magic take-home messages for us. Yes,
take-home message. Remember, because what we are trying to do through this show today is, I've been going around talking about mental health. I have worked with mental health experts in our own community who provide mental health education and so on and so forth, right? And from, fortunately, I had this opportunity to get education and training about mental illness. But everyone cannot attend those trainings. Sometimes these trainings are expensive. Sometimes this training happens once in a while because even to conduct those training, it costs a lot of money. And I wanted to share this knowledge, through this show.
Right.
I'm not providing any training here, but I want to share this knowledge and what we have understood and what I have understand myself personally is we need to make mental illness challenges or mental health disorder issues a very conversational, simple, and we have to simplify word. We have to say in a everyday language. That's what we need to say about mental illness. So the three magical that you are waiting to know about, the three magical sentences or three key messages. Let's say the three key messages. Okay. Okay. We want to correct ourselves. The three key messages is one, mental illness. We already talked about it.
We already talked about
summary.
it. Yes.
This is kind of a summary.
Yeah.
Mental illness is a disease.
That's
So
true.
understand that disease is anything that could be someone suffering with diabetes, someone suffering with blood pressure,
Yes.
or even someone suffering with, let's say, going through
tuberculosis
or
any
cancer or
bacterial disease,
anything.
right?
This is bad in itself. But mental health is one of those diseases.
Right.
Meaning person not feeling well within his own body. First thing, mental health is a disease.
Yeah.
Second, mental health is a curable disease. The second thing everybody need to understand, the listener who are listening to us need to understand, the second thing is mental health is a curable disease. It has treatment.
Yes.
Okay. Third thing that we have to know about the mental health is we need to talk about mental illness within our friend circle, within our family circle,
Right.
within those we know. It's not someone's responsibility. It is not someone, doctor's responsibility, or it's not a psychiatric's responsibility or a social worker's responsibility. It is our responsibility. When 1 out of 5%, when a family member within a family is struggling with mental illness today in the United States, these are facts. It is our responsibility. It is common responsibility that we have to bear in mind. And, I'm not asking everybody, hey, you should go tomorrow, you study about mental illness, be a doctor or a psychiatric. What I'm saying is basically start talking about it. We have to overcome the taboos. We have to overcome these taboos. Once we establish mental illness as illness, once we establish mental illness as a disease, and once we know that mental illness has a treatment,
Right.
that is our role. That is the message we have to send to our friends and families.
So once again, the same message: mental health is a disease.
No, mental
health
illness. Sorry,
is a disease.
mental illness is a disease.
Mental illness is curable, and talk about it.
Talk about it.
Talk
Talk
about
about it. But I want to give a warning. If you don't know, don't talk about it. What you don't know, you don't know. Right? Do not spread misconception about mental illness. And I want to share one encounter. Last year, I was invited to go to one of the community event in Pittsburgh, and there we find a gentleman who is he's a known person. He's famous in the community. He has made some wealth, and at the end of the show, he asked us few questions just to determine, what is the condition of mental illness in our community. And we gave some data and we gave some facts, and he said, oh wow, which means only 0.1% of the people are suffering with mental illness, or 0.1% of the population has died because of the suicide. Why are you making this an issue, right? But we have to understand, don't spread those words. It's not about 0.1% or 0.2%. It's not about percentage. This is a disease. 0.1 could be 0.2 and 0.3 anytime. This could change pretty rapidly. It's not about 0.1%. 25% of the people are struggling with mental illness, right?
Yeah.
So we should not misinformed if we have access to talk about it, because this is a disease.
Right.
Even one person, in the same event, in the same seminar, there was a psychiatric doctor, Dr. Thompson's, and he said that, Sudarshan, even if one person is this because of this suicide, that's too many people, right?
Yeah.
Even if one person is struggling with mental illness, that's too many people.
Yeah.
So we have to understand from that perspective. So learn about the basic mental illness, mental health 101, and talk to your family and friends. If you are in a workplace, talk about it.
Right.
Have 1 hour or two once a week and talk about this. Talk about wellness. Right? And help your friend. You cannot expect someone to come there. Oftentimes people call me and say, hey, Sudarshan, we have someone in our workplace and he's struggling with mental illness. people like me, I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to help, but there are only few who are doing this job, right? And we can't be everywhere. We wanted to be, but that's impossible. So what we need to do is you have to help your friend if your friend is struggling. That's the message.
Okay. Mental illness is curable. Once again, mental illness, we are talking about mental illness, and it's not a topic that can be covered in one session. We are bringing up some upcoming sessions on the mental illness and the first aid also. So what are we talking about mental illness on our next week?
So in the coming week, we will try to introduce mental health first aid, right? It's not a first aid training, please.
Right.
Just basic mental health first aid, what we need to know.
What we need to know.
How to understand mental health and some diagnosis, some basic diagnosis. This does not make you an expert. We are not trying to say that you will be an expert. Just giving you some basic understanding. If you see sudden diagnosis like these symptoms.
Yeah, if you see some symptoms, at least you could say that some person is not having a good health issues. I would say the mental health.
Yeah, it's difficult to put into the word. But if you understand some symptoms, it helps you understand your own cause. You may be suffering from it, or your loved one, near dear one, may be struggling with it.
Right.
You can say, you need to contact your doctor or psychiatrist or a social worker or a community person. Only to do that, you won't be able to treat. I won't be able to treat even if I know how to diagnose, right? So the point is, when it comes to treatment, they need to go see a doctor. They need to go see a counselor. Remember, please, do not try to treat. But the point is, if you know how to make initial assessment, some diagnosis, if you see some symptoms, you are an aid. You could be a help to someone. That's the message in the next. So we will try to bring those messages.
Yeah, you are an aid and you could help someone. So our studio time is already 11 past 7 and we are already
no, 7 past 11.
Yes.
Okay.
11 past 7, right?
No. Oh, that's very confusing. Yeah, that's interesting, right? So do you say 11 past 7 or 7 past 11? Okay, so you are right, Ravi. Yeah. It's 11 past 7 in the studio, and we have 2 more minutes, and we are going to end this. So, sorry, I just cracked a joke. I think I was confused too, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And but the point is, yes, Ravi is right, and mental health discussions should also be like this, right? It doesn't have to be very serious.
That's what we want.
Yeah, that is what we wanted it to be. Very conversational, but also we are talking about an important issue. It doesn't have to be very serious. We don't have to be very serious and talk about, how do we define, right? Mental health, what is the definition? It can be a normal conversation. That is what we wanted to say today.
Yeah, we also wanted all our, if we have any participants come to the studio or message us or text us, we'll try to update your questions. You'll try to answer your questions. With that said, depression comes and goes. The best way to tackle the depression is face the problem. It might seem hard at times, but once you try, you'll feel better. Feel positive for what you have it in hand rather than what you never achieved. Remember, there are others who are struggling hard to get something which you already achieved. If you feel negative to life, go to gym, do yoga, stay busy, and best of all, speak to someone. Speak about how you feel. If you want to speak to us, speak to us. This is Ravi and Sudarshan signing off with a promise to be back again on next Sunday, right at 6 p.m. with some interesting topic.
But also please excuse us for some technical error.
Yeah, that's true.
We are struggling with this. Is a very small studio with whatever fund we have, and APEX1RADIO has been very generous to help us. But we are going through some technical issues. Maybe it is fault on our end. We are messing up with some keys. But we are promising that we will be back next week at 6 p.m.
Right.
Even if you can't hear us, we'll be there. We'll be in the studio.
We'll be there.
We'll be there. Yes.
So till then,
stay tuned. Yes.
Do good, be good. This is Radio Jagaran, the voice of New Americans.
New American from Central Ohio.